560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by Health Quest Radio with Dr. David Kolbaba. Saturday mornings at 11. Visit healthquestradio.com.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy, to diagnose the economic outlook for America. You have to certainly take into account the political landscape. To help us understand where things are, we had Donald Trump taking a break on the golf course to speak to some friends. And his review of the situation with the other side was captured on smartphone and then broadcast for the world to enjoy. Here's Trump with Barron in tow. Wonder how good a player Barron is.
Yeah, it's 6'10".
Wonder if he could beat Joe Biden in a driving contest. Trump is probably practicing for that driving contest, and he's going to have to carry his own bag, too, we understand. Here's Trump.
You gave me so much. How did I do with the debate the other night?
Oh, amazing.
He kicked that old broken down pile of crap.
Yeah.
It's a bad guy. He just quit, you know. He's quitting the race.
Is that right?
Yep, I got him out of the race. And that means we have Kamala. I think she's going to be better. She's so bad. She's so pathetic.
It's so amazing.
It's just so bad. So,
I just can't imagine.
but can you imagine that guy with dealing with Putin and the president of China, who's a fierce person? He's a fierce man, a very tough guy. And they see them, they probably they can't. But they just announced he's probably quitting.
Good.
Very good.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Just keep knocking him out, right?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Wow. How do you really feel about her, huh?
it's a Trump hot take. It almost comes across as like staged because it's just so off the cuff and basically, you know, as in Trump vernacular, the sort of the common lingo, he is saying what a majority of the country believes based on the polling, that Biden is politically comatose and Kamala is terrible. So they're in a corner. By the way, it just reminds me like a personal indulgence. Remember that interview that Trump did with Tucker a while back in which he diagnosed Kamala's way of communicating. I thought this was fun. It'd be fun for him to bring this back again on a debate stage, whether it's Joe on September 10th or Kamala.
So back to Biden, I'm interested. So you think he's failing? He obviously is failing. I think it's clear to everybody. But that would make Kamala Harris the candidate?
Well, not really. I mean, I guess they'd have maybe a free-for-all. A lot of people say she has to remain for certain reasons the candidate. She has to. I don't think that's true, actually. I don't think that other people would stand for it. She has some bad moments. Her moments are almost as bad as his. I think his are worse, actually.
Yeah.
But
She seems pretty senile, too.
she speaks in rhyme. It's weird. It's weird. But she has bad moments. And
In rhyme? What do you...
well, the way she talks, the bus will go here and then the bus will go there because that's what buses do. And it's weird. The whole thing is weird.
It is weird.
Oh, I just cackled like her, but no, that's great. That's true.
Yeah.
Things are the way they are because they are.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean,
Deep Thoughts with Kamala Harris.
the Kamala Greatest Hits album just continues to expand. For more on the economic impact of the political tumult, James Perry, founder, CIO, Perry International Capital Partners, joins us. Jim, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Good morning.
So this volatility that has spiked since the debate from a week ago Thursday doesn't seem to be impacting the market very much because I guess as long as those, as you call them, long-duration, big-cap tech stocks are churning, then all is right on Wall Street.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, history will show you that things like outbreaks of war and political upheaval generally aren't really good events to trade the market or to invest or and think about getting into or out of the market because they tend to kind of stabilize over time. But as you know, you've said it many times, and it feels like now that this whole demise of the presidency here is not good for the country. I mean, it doesn't really matter what your political beliefs are, but the fact is that when you've got, the leader of the free world who is clearly in trouble here, it gives a lot of ammunition to friend and foe alike. And it's disconcerting to me as an investor. I'm not a political expert like you are and many people are, but it just feels like for some reason the market's kind of just holding its breath, waiting for all of this to go away.
And so, but is the essential belief that as long as NVIDIA is all right, it doesn't matter if Biden is?
Say that again?
As long as NVIDIA is all right, it doesn't matter if Biden is? Is that basically the attitude?
Well, I mean, that's kind of a funny way to put it, but, this Mag 7 group of stocks really is a phenomenal story, and a lot of investors really are diving into the narrative. And once investors do that, the problem is that they tend to overlook fundamentals and just believe that AI is going to change the world. And maybe it's the same thing with politics. That, don't worry, the White House is always going to be here, so let's just move on. I think everybody just wants to sort of shove it under a carpet or something like that.
Well, how are the European... Oh, sorry, Dan, go ahead.
Well, we were just talking, that's where I was going. We were just talking with Stephen Bucci about the elections in France and the UK. So
Right.
those elections, so does that mean with the leftists winning in both countries, does that mean more money flows out of Europe and into the U.S.?
The flows from Europe to the U.S. have been very strong. I think investors recognize that pretty much the same thing that people here do. I wrote my weekly strategy report last night, and my main point on what's going on in Europe is that, it seems to me, and again, not being a political, expert on this sort of stuff, but the voters are tired of the status quo, which is just an increased level of what can only be described as statism. I mean, it's the same problems that exist here exist in France and England and Germany and really in China and Japan too. Just excessive indebtedness and deficit spending. The people who pay for it are the voters, and people are fed up because their quality of life is going down because they cannot keep up with the amount of money that the government's spending, and the governments are going to have to tax them more. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, right, and it's interesting because it's sort of belied by the results in England and France. But if you look a little bit below the surface, as we were talking about, it was a rejection of sclerotic conservative governance that was not conservative in Britain. And it was some sleight of hand politically by Macron and the ruling party in France to align with the radical left to forestall more essentially conservative gains in France. So it was,
correct.
And that's politics. But there was some, maneuvering that was done in France that belies sort of the revolt that you're talking about of people not being able to make ends meet or struggling to.
That's exactly right. I mean, the Mexican leadership went to the left, but it was still a revolt against the state, right? It was people just saying, hey, this isn't working. It's corrupt. We're getting too many lies. We're not getting the truth. Germany, same thing. UK. And then here, right? I mean, when you look at prices here and you look at what the government spends its money on, it really begs the question, how are they going to turn this thing around? I mean, we're talking about $35 trillion worth of national debt now, right? I mean, that's an enormous number. It was 27, this time before the last election, right? So we're talking about another $7-8 trillion of national debt. And I think that if you look at where it's spent, you kind of wonder, how's it ever going to not keep rising? That's the biggest problem. And then the French people feel that way too, as do the Japanese and the Chinese. So it's just big government gone, run amok.
Well, we're going to see inflation data this week. We're also going to start getting corporate earnings by week's end. What can we anticipate there?
I think the whole market is just chomping at the bit for lower rates here. They priced in about 6 or 8 cuts last year at this time. We've gotten none. The Fed last raised its rate in July of 23, right? So everybody thought that with these rate cuts coming off the table, the stock market would be coming down, and it hasn't. So the market's doing something that nobody really expected it to do, as is the economy, right? And I think one of the reasons is, you look at these inflation numbers, and I wrote a little portion about it. Madame Lagarde was in Sintra, Portugal last week, and she said, I don't mean to sound egotistical, but we're doing a great job of getting inflation down, And I kind of went, wow, man, that's really a great way for governments to look at it, but it doesn't feel that way for people, right? I mean, disinflation is not deflation, and it's really nothing to be proud of. And prices are still going up, Disinflation means prices are still rising. And if a government official says inflation is going down, that doesn't really mean prices are going down. It means that the speed at which the prices are going up is decreasing, right? And there's a big disconnect between what the government and even Wall Street economists say about prices and how people really feel about them. And Amy, you and I have talked about this over the years here, but food prices in the country are not up 25% in 4 years. They're up more like 100.
Right.
And they're not going down. They've stopped rising as much as they were. But the fact is that, if you really look at the aggregate price increases in the economy for the prices of things that people have to pay for, I mean, they're up at least 30% from 4 years ago, and they're not going down. A 3% inflation rate or a 3.3% inflation rate means that prices are still rising, and people are furious.
That's true. I'm just going to push back a little because I've noticed something at Mariano's. They have these pre-ordered meals that you buy, and they were $9.99 forever, and then after COVID, it went up to $13.99. I went there last week, and it was back to $9.99. Is President Biden pressuring grocery store owners to lower prices on certain items so that he looks good, so that he could get reelected?
I think the White House has a lot of fun jawboning the thing, and if things go their way, they take credit for it. But the reality is, I think that some prices, and you've seen this across the country, McDonald's has a $5 value meal now, and Starbucks is cutting some prices. And I think that what's happening really is the economy is slowing down. I mean, people have gotten to the point where they just cannot use the same budgets they had before and buy the same thing. So prices are coming down and demand is slowing. I mean, since May, really, May and June, the sort of Citibank Surprise Index of Economic Indicators has gone down quite substantially. Now, these numbers are more survey-oriented than really hard data. But the fact is that, I think there is a slowdown in the economy coming here that's a little bit surprising. The Atlanta Fed was talking about a 3% second quarter GDP number, less than a month ago. Now it's down to 1%. So I think as the economy slows and as demand slows, retailers are forced to cut prices because the foot traffic through their stores is going down.
Well, I noticed that the seafood paella at Victory in Elmhurst was, a little pricier than I am, normally. So I had to get the less expensive Super Tuscan, and I considered not getting the chocolate mousse for dessert. So it's starting to hit people like people like me, and obviously that's of concern to everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah. Having to forego the chocolate mousse is painful stuff.
I mean, it's just no way to live, and I think we can all agree on that.
Exactly.
With respect to the policy choices upcoming, so you mentioned no rates cuts yet this year, and only the sort of long duration big tech stocks seem to be comfortable with the Fed policy. So what is the anticipation from now until election? Just sort of stay the course and hope things continue to click along such that people's 401k seem relatively relatively stable and in climbing incrementally, even if they're getting hammered at the grocery store and the pump?
Yeah, exactly. Well said, and good thought process here. I mean, to be honest with you, the stock market really, again, is at all-time highs, right? And the economy is slowing down. But the fact is that, what's driving the economy, what's given us the surprise upside on economic growth over the last year, hasn't been the normal business cycle kind of response, to rates that really are high by comparison to the last 5 to 10 years, but they're still pretty low. So I think that the market is looking at this going into the election as if we get a little bit of a slowdown here, the same thing that's been happening over the last 3 years will happen again, and that is that fiscal stimulus, more deficit spending will come into the economy before the election to make everybody feel a little bit better before they go to the voting booth.
I got one more quick question for you too. Crypto. All of this talk about government debt and the reserve currency status of the dollar and so forth, and yet and the market performing well, and crypto seem to rise along with the market as opposed to being an inflation hedge. And yet, the volatility there with Bitcoin back under 60 grand after topping out at 70 not so long ago. So do we have any better handle on exactly what's going on with cryptos, particularly Bitcoin?
I'm not an expert in the field, Dan, to be honest with you. And I do own some, and I've had it for a long time, and it's a very small amount. But the reason I bought it was to just follow it and track it and read everything I could read about it. And I don't really see how, as Larry Fink at BlackRock says, it's the new liquid gold. And I said, well, if it's that sort of, libertarian kind of get me out of the government, get me out of the markets, and I'm worried about the dollar. If that's the case, why not buy gold? That's my view on it. And I think that Bitcoin, just this whole move in the last month, Bitcoin's down 20%, right? There's been some Bitcoins in some of these wallets that have been stuck in there for 10 years, right? Now, if you're worried about your money being stuck in the financial system, and you find out that the owners of this stuff are finally, after 10 years, able to get their money back, that doesn't seem like a very good alternative to me. It makes me feel like, geez, I'm really glad I don't own that. So I think, I'll cut to the chase on this one really quick, and I'll just say this. There's a website or two that can allow investors to see what politicians are buying with their investment funds, right? And, it's the same old stuff, NVIDIA, Palo Alto Networks, and all this sort of stuff. But what's interesting is the number of politicians, this is the House of Representatives and the Senate, 500-odd people, only 2 of them own Bitcoin. Right?
Yeah, that's telling.
That's
Jim Perry, founder, CIO of Perry International Capital Partners. Thanks as always, Jim. Appreciate it.
You bet. Have a good week.
Thank you, and he joined us on our Turnkey.pro answer line. Coming up on Chicago's Morning Answer.
We'll return to Biden's future at 8:08.
It is now 8 a.m. WIND Chicago.
Biden under more pressure. I'm Dave Anthony, Fox News, as Congress returns today. And Fox's Madeline Rivera reports from the White House.
At least 5 House Democrats have gone public with their calls for the president to step aside, but there is a lot more frustration churning behind closed doors. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries had a virtual meeting with ranking House Committee Dems on Sunday. Several of them